So, you guys are getting both of these episodes back to back, and it's good because the things that we're talking about, one leads directly into how the other was able to happen. Um, so, you know, it'll be a good couple of hours of listening if you guys want to knock it out. It'll be fun. How you doing today, Ben?
I'm doing pretty good. It's been a fun day. Not really, but I've been playing video games and I have a job interview Tuesday, so hopefully that goes well.
I'm very excited for you for that.
I'm not going to say where at though.
No, I didn't expect you to. That's why I didn't say,
Yeah,
dear. Um, Nobody needs to know where you're interviewing. They just need to be happy that you're doing it.
I'm interviewing with ICE. I told them that I like to play first person shooters. I'm really good at headshots, and
Did
if
you
they,
did you emphasize how much you hate women and anybody that's not white?
oh,
Because
of
that's a
course.
big thing. Okay, good,
Of
good,
course,
good.
yeah. I mean, that's like that was question one. Do you hate women? Question two. Do you hate minorities? Question three. If you have a wife, would you beat her? And then there's a whole essay about how to beat your wife. And then there's a driving test where there's a dummy in front of you that's a protester. Behind you, you can back up, but if you back up,
Right,
you fail. So this is
right.
a trick. You have to floor it and run over the protester, and then as you pull up against another protester, roll down your window and shoot them. Uh,
Yes.
I
America's
aced
in a
it.
very dark time right now when we're joking about things like this because we don't know what else to do.
Who said anything but a joke? This is the actual test.
You know, I given what we've seen, I would believe you.
Yeah. No, I couldn't do that. I do shave my head, but I think that's the only thing that I do correctly to get into ice.
Right? Most of your friends are women. You're a very compassionate person. Yeah, yeah. No, you wouldn't fit in there at all, which is
Well,
good.
and my most recent long-term ex was from Kenya, and those Kenyans, they keep slipping in presidents, so it's not a winning combination.
Understood. Yeah. So, um, God, did you see Trump falling asleep at Lindsey Graham's funeral?
No, I actually have not been following politics this
Gotcha.
today. I, I'm not surprised. He falls asleep
There's the
everywhere.
meme the meme of the guy standing behind him and the horrified face he makes when he smells Trump, and it's all over the internet.
I have seen that. I didn't know that was from Lindsay's funeral. I did see that.
Yeah.
It looked like Trump might have had a Bebo. I
Yep.
think, is that the right
Yep.
term? I haven't raised a
The
young
the
kid.
the the presidential diaper.
Yeah, smell force one.
Because Biden was so unfit for the job because he was elderly and not able to do it, but this guy, they're
W-
just gonna weekend at Bernie's him until they can't anymore.
But Trump doesn't like ice cream like Biden did, so he likes
Oh
Big
gosh.
Macs. And no, I've only had a Big Mac maybe once in my life.
Wow. Okay.
I do like the quarter pounder of cheese, but the Big Mac has never appealed to me.
Okay. Interesting. I mean, it kind of makes sense knowing your taste in food, though.
I do like greasy beef meat.
Not necessarily smothered in a sauce and lettuce and a bunch of other stuff either, though.
I did try the McArch, the burger that the CEO
Right.
became notorious for taking those little bites. I did try it, and not a fan. I would
Yeah.
take small bites too.
Yeah. Watch a man who's never had any of his own product try and convince us that he likes it.
Yeah, I've been watching a lot of why restaurants fail videos on YouTube, which I know is a weird thing to get into, but it's interesting. They all kind of come down to two things. One, a company either makes itself so it can't adapt, like it's known for quality, so it can't lower quality. It's known for cheap prices, so when it needs to raise prices, it can't do that. Something like that. Or it fails because they stop hiring from within and they start hiring the CEO class, these
Yep.
professional shysters who move from company to company
That's
and
where
destroy the
private
company.
equity comes in. That's
Yeah,
where private equity comes in.
which I understand we're going to talk a little bit about today.
Yeah. Yeah, we are. The first the case that was supposed to go up last week was Enron, and you can listen to all of that before this. But what we're coming into after talking about Enron is Bernie Madoff.
Ooh.
Bernie Madoff. Oh boy. I know you told me previously to this that you really just remember the very, very broad strokes of this case. You remember that it was a Ponzi scheme. You remember that it happened like in the middle of the financial meltdown in '08. But
Yeah.
like other than that, you don't know a lot of the finer points of this.
Yeah, for being such a Bernie bro, I'm really totally clueless on Bernie.
Wrong Bernie, honey.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Goofball. Yeah, okay. So Bernie Madoff was kind of thought to be this like financial wizard. The reason that his whole long-term con worked as well as it did is because he was able to successfully for like 30 years rob Peter to pay Paul. He was able to move his money around to the point where it looked like to his investors, like when they first signed up and everything, they were actually seeing like significant returns like he had promised them. But when the market crashed in '08 and like everything ground to a halt and like banks started defaulting and stuff, like he just physically could not keep up the charade anymore because it was literally just like you know those games with the like where you have three cups and there's a ball under one of them and then you mix them all up and you have to guess where the balls are.
Yeah, three cups, one ball. I've heard of it.
Yeah, yeah. It's like that. You know, he was moving his money to wherever people were looking. So anytime people looked into what he was doing, it looked like he had all that liquid. Like it looked like he had everything up to code. And really, the company didn't just have like two sets of books, it had three, and it was really just some of the wildest financial maneuvering that has like ever come to light in American financial crimes. Just for the sheer fact that he was able to sustain the con for decades. And like,
I'm gonna take a guess and say that in 2029 something's gonna come to light that puts that to shame.
well, it already did with Sam Bankman Fried, but a lot of people don't think about SBF as being a Ponzi scheme because crypto's not regulated the same way.
That's true.
So what he did at the time technically wasn't illegal. It wasn't explicitly legal either. There were just not laws about it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. It
When
does.
Bernie was doing his stuff, there were definitely laws against what he was doing. It was just outright fraud. But a lot of these Ponzi schemes and pyramid shaped business options, rather, are moving into the crypto spaces because uh, look at how much money the president has made from crypto just off of his office, which should be a blatant violation of the emoluments clause. But we don't have laws here anymore.
Well, it's very much breaking the Mallows clause. I can't imagine the founding fathers being okay with it. Like if they could understand crypto and everything in their minds, uh, like this is exactly what the Constitution was written to avoid. And I've seen a lot of experts that follow how democracies become oligarchs
Yep,
and break that will of the people. And America's the fastest example, faster than
yep,
Russia, faster than Turkey, faster than, well, maybe faster than China, but faster than Russia and Turkey and Hungary.
yeah,
And there's no one bothering to stop. And maybe it's because people are just comfortable thinking, well, in 2 years things will change. And yeah, that's why we probably don't uprise as much as maybe you could argue we should. But it's definitely an issue where our country is changing faster than any other country has in history.
yep, and not in a good way.
No. Um, Christian nationalism
A
is
death cult?
it is. And like people that are Christian nationalists would say, no, we're not. But if you think about it, their whole premise relies on,
Ushering in the apocalypse to bring back Jesus?
yeah, which involves the destruction of Israel. So
Right,
those people are the most anti-Semitic people possible.
right.
But anyway, sorry, got off
Yeah,
topic.
no, no, it's not really off topic actually because Bernie Madoff had significant ties to Israel.
Color me shocked.
Right?
Israel is the most upstanding country in the world. I'm astonished.
Right? Oh my God. Have you seen the videos of Smotrich on the October 7th attacks basically confirming that the Hannibal Directive was absolutely in play?
Is that where they destroy their own people?
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, I'd heard that. Uh, yeah. I
No, they
mean,
have video proof of him just outright saying it. It's been all over the place.
yeah.
Yep. Wild behavior all over the world. I don't know what it is, but about every 100 years, all of the major like solidified empires that are in existence at that time just lose their freaking minds.
So it follows a set pattern,
Yep.
and we can trace it pretty closely. So what happens with ancient Rome and uh, the British Empire, all this stuff, is y- you have, it's kind of like that meme about strong men, tough times make tough men, and then blah blah. When you start an empire, you begin with people that have a like they have same set of ideals and they're hard workers. It's hard work
Yep.
making an empire.
Yep.
But then they become, over the generations, this isn't a single generation thing. Over the generations, they become lax. Like the difference between Xerxes and Cyrus the Great. I'm going to put
Yeah.
my Persian history to the test, but I think that's only like 3 generations. So it's it doesn't take long for a civilization to collapse. And Xerxes was even one of the better Persian rulers, if I recall. So like it doesn't take long for an empire to cave in on itself. Now Rome, they would occasionally every couple of 100 years switch centers of power. You would have like one dynasty, of course, it started in Rome, but then you'd have another dynasty that would be from maybe Spain or from they or one of the other cities. And this fluctuation made it so that the new dynasty brought new ideas, new strongmen, and could keep the empire rolling. And that's a benefit, I guess you could say, about a royal court system. A situation when a new dynasty comes in and they restart things, fresh blood enters the scene. But in the modern era, you don't really get that because the difference between a ruling class from, say, Washington, D.C. or Washington State, there's not a huge difference because people are so mobile nowadays. And so you don't get this new dynasty churn. And then things stagnate. People get comfortable. Things don't get done. Things gridlock. Countries like England can't even get laws passed because there's so much regulation. And I know a lot of people on the right rail against regulation, but there's bad regulation. I mean, Masani, what's his name? New York mayor, sorry, trying to
Mamdani.
Mamdani. Thank you, Mamdani lifted that one on ice cream, for example. So there's bad regulation out there, and this just takes a little while for a country to fall into that trap, and we have fallen into that trap, the same trap that the
Yep.
we're becoming. I don't think our collapse will be like the collapse of the Soviet Union or the collapse of Rome. I think it'll be like the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, where the Ottoman Empire reached its height in like 1660 or something like that, but lasted until the 20th century. It was the sick man of Europe, and I think America, if we have this ruling class we've had now for since really the Civil War, if we have this ruling class, we're going to eventually have a sick man of North America.
Yep. I think we already do.
Yeah, but it's hard to tell because these things are on larger than human lifetimes.
Yeah.
So, like, if you looked at Rome in, say, 50 BC, you might think, oh, Rome's screwed. But depending on how you count it, it lasted another 1,500 years. So it's it's hard to know for sure. This is something we as mere mortals can't see in our lifetime easily.
Yeah, it's something that you can really only look at in retrospect. It's that hindsight being 2020 thing. Um, but if you know what the patterns are, you can spot that the patterns are happening around you because you're right, they are very predictable patterns of behavior.
Yeah. And I think Bernie Madoff is just an example of that. The example of rule of law breaking down. I mean, this was before Trump's complete lawlessness, but we still had a structure where people could take gambles and not worry about any consequences. And I see this a lot in civil law where people are completely screwed by companies. And these companies know they're screwing people over, but it's okay because these companies are backed by the law that they don't actually face any consequences. It's like corporations are people, but they're immune from any consequence.
Yep. And they became more immune from any consequence after the 2014 decision of Citizens United, which is one of the worst things that we ever did.
Yeah. I would say it's easily top five worst things the United States have ever done. Yes, the United States has committed genocide, and by lives, that's always more. But when you think about long term health of a country, getting rid of the rule of law will make those kinds of genocides inevitable in the future. Like
Yep.
the
Well, I
world.
mean, look at how it's going down right now. Like, if you even so much as call it a genocide out loud, you can lose your job in
Hmm.
some places.
Yeah.
But we supposedly have freedom of speech, right?
Yep. Freedom of speech as long as they agree with us.
Yep.
Which is no freedom at all.
Yep. So, do you remember what it was like leading up to the financial collapse of '08? Like, do you remember how, like, we had gotten through the dot-com bubble, stuff was cheap, people were buying up properties left and right, like, there was a whole house flipping thing going on. Like, do you kinda remember what the environment was like?
So At the time I was in college. I graduated college. I really had like one class my last semester. So I basically graduated college in 2008. So
Hmm.
I was in the bubble of college, and
Right.
I was actually conservative up until Katrina. Katrina is what changed my mind about being conservative, because I realized I had empathy and they didn't.
Right.
But yeah, even though I was in this kind of a bubble, I did notice that like property was cheap. Like my
Yeah.
rent at that time was 215 bucks a month.
Mine was like 450.
Yeah. I mean, I had roommates, so if I had
Yeah.
the place by myself, it'd probably be about that much. But yeah, 215 a month. Imagine that, guys. That's how much it increases by per year now.
Right. And if you live in a state like Indiana where they allow things like no fault eviction, which we're one of only like 3 states that'll allow a landlord to evict somebody for like no cause, no reason, they just want you out. And they most of the time in Indiana, the courts will say that's legal and they'll honor it.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, it's wild out there right now, but it was wild out there in the years leading up to '08 because you had all of these banks um, pushing these mortgage-backed securities and pushing these mortgages on people that they fundamentally knew could not afford them. Like they were taking people with like a 200 credit score and setting them up with a mortgage. And the interest rates were through the roof. Like, and they were convincing people that this was an okay thing to do. Like this was an industry-wide practice, which is why the '08 housing crisis like basically hit on a global scale
Yeah, and
because a
it
lot of people who own property in America don't live in America.
true. And I mean, it's a security threat. Like
Yep.
China owns tons of farmland, and other countries do too. And then in cities, you have these. You're right. So what they do is these authoritative countries. It's hard to get money out. So the best way they do it is they buy property in America, and doing that, they can buy it with local funds and move things around for that. But then that's how they get their funds out of these authoritative countries.
Yep.
And
It was money laundering.
oh yeah, yeah,
But I mean, that is the stage, that you're kind of leading up to this collapse, right? You have just about every financial advisor in the United States basically like engaging in fraud of some kind. Like um Bernie was just the biggest one that they caught because he had like I mean like he was kind of thought of as like a he was kind of thought of as a financial whiz kid, right? Like if you invested your money with Bernie Madoff, he had a reputation of like you were going to see massive returns. And the returns that he was promising are not even realistic for like a fantastic day trader. Okay. Like the kind of returns that Bernie Madoff was promising, and I need to state this, was delivering to his customers for many, many years was not at all a sustainable model, like from the beginning, right? But this man somehow managed to keep all of the balls in the air, keep his reputation, keep his funds coming in, keep money laundering things. He was able to do it for like 30 years. And this is somebody who I mean, you had like movie stars invested with Bernie Madoff. You had politicians invested with Bernie Madoff. Somebody had to know this was a bad deal somewhere along the line.
well,
Like,
I've heard he only got caught because he was ripping off the powerful. Like, had he
yeah,
been going after only small time investors, he would have got away with it if it was meddling rich and powerful elites.
Well, and really the biggest, like the bulk of his customers, the thing that was the worst about Bernie Madoff was that by the time that it crashed, we were in the 401k era of like retirement investing, and a lot of retirement funds were invested through Madoff.
Yeah.
And like when you sign up for a 401k, right? Like if you don't handpick everything like from the beginning, and not all 401ks even will let you do that. A lot of times they just say, we're going to take your money, we'll invest it for you, here's your portfolio. And so, like, the majority of his investors were like teachers, firefighters, like, and it was people all over the country. And most of them were not making the decision themselves to invest with Bernie Madoff. It was these financial advisors who were higher up in the pecking order who, like, maybe partied with Bernie. Maybe they knew Bernie because he had this sterling reputation for a very, very long time of really making good on like he was really good at faking the funk. He would actually deliver these profits to people. And like, had he not actually delivered the kind of profit that he had promised people for so long, nobody would have taken him seriously because the things that the returns that he was promising, I don't even know if they're physically possible.
It kind of reminds me of, I'm not gonna say the company's name, but they do rockets and robotics and stuff, and
Yeah.
it kind of similar to where people's retirement is suddenly invested. And just to throw a number out there, like a trillion or $1.3 trillion
Right.
profit. That's the person, not even the company. I think the company is like 2.5 trillion, and these people don't really have an option unless they are really keeping an eye on their investment. And one day they may
Well,
wake
I
up.
mean, and a lot of companies won't even let you pick your own stocks. Like they just take your retirement money and invest it for you. A lot of these places will not let you pick.
Yeah. So it just reminds me of that company. And again, I won't say the name, but to me, it sounds like that could be a very similar situation.
It is very similar. That there's a reason we're talking about it today. It's quite similar in a lot of ways. And you know, I got really into this case when it dropped because I was going through a really tough time in my life, and like I was just, I'm neurodivergent, so I was, falling down these rabbit holes of like any research that I could on anything cuz I'm one of those weirdos who will like find a topic that interests me and then I will immediately go learn everything about it that I can. Like I get hyper fixated on certain things, and like financial crimes are one of those things I get hyper fixated on because in the retrospective everything always looks incredibly obvious, and like the red flags are always there. These people always tell you exactly who they are. It's just if they're offering you large sums of money and they keep offering you large sums of money, like capitalism, baby.
Yeah, it's hard to say no to all the different Benjamins staring at you. Like, I'm just one Benjamin, and I
and
can't compete with a whole
I have a
suitcase.
hard time saying no to you. Have for 16 years. And you're just one.
Yeah, imagine a suitcase full of me.
That would either be the most amazing thing or the most annoying thing in the world, and it would entirely depend on your mood that day.
I think it'd be the most amazing thing.
I love your confidence. Um, okay, so Bernie Madoff was a financial advisor who had like a very strong skill and who had apparently by word of mouth a very strong skill. But what he did have was a good track record. Like these people could show you month after month for at least 4 or 5 years going into it that like they were actually getting those kinds of returns. Now, they were not getting those kinds of returns because he was investing the money properly. They were getting those kinds of returns because he was also hooking in really high level investors and taking their investment money, and instead of investing it in anything, he was sending it to to the other people who would invest it. That's what I mean when I say it's a shell game. So
Hmm.
like he would get like 3 or 4 really big high dollar clients on the line at a time, right? And then he would charge them way more exorbitantly than he would anybody else, which is fair, right? But then instead of taking their money and investing it and like giving them genuine returns on things, he would just take the money that he got directly from the rich people, put it in a bank account, and then, you know, distribute it to these smaller investors so they were actually seeing all these returns. And then, you know, when he got more big investors, he'd funnel the money sideways to other clients. Are
That
you
makes it.
starting to see you're starting to see kind of how that got sticky pretty
Yeah,
quick?
yeah. So basically, he has 10 investors and invest $10. Big investor
Uh-huh.
comes, invests $200. He takes
Yep.
100 of those dollars, puts it in each of the $10 people's account, and all of a sudden, those people double their money, whereas he pocketed 100, and then he can rug pull on the remainder. Basically, is what you're saying.
Yep. Yep. It was always like and the interesting part about this is with Bernie is that once he was caught, he was very open about the fact he was like, I always knew it couldn't go on forever. I don't know how it went on as long as it did. I don't know how I was able to, you know, build my reputation for 30 years on people actually getting their returns when we were literally just funneling money in one place out the other. Very little actual investing was taking place. And the kind of investing that was taking place was this like Jordan Belfort penny stock bullshit.
It's really impressive because he'd been doing this for 30 years, got caught in '08. So he was doing this before Excel and
Yep.
Microsoft database. Like, I don't know. It's kind of like how does George R. R. Martin keep track of his characters? How does this guy keep track of his scams?
That's the thing. Like the guy was clearly intelligent. He was clearly industrious. Like he was able arguably the scam took more work to upkeep than actually investing would have. But if he actually invested the money, he couldn't promise those returns to people. So then you start having other investors looking at the kind of returns that Bernie's getting for his clients, and everybody's going, "No, we want to be with Bernie. We'll get more money with Bernie. We'll get more money with Bernie." Like, and it became this very large word of mouth sort of thing that spread in much wealthier circles that like Bernie Madoff will triple your money basically. And like that reputation held because for a long time he was able to make it appear that that's what he was doing.
Yeah.
And nobody even cottoned on that he may have been doing something wonky until 2001 after Enron. Like nobody looked at him sideways through the 80s, through the 90s. Like it was really the beginning of the 2000s that it started to crumble. And it didn't even fully crumble then because he was able to get a good PR firm and like there were a couple of articles in the New Yorker, there were a couple of articles in the Wall Street Journal that like you would think would have put a significant dent in his customer base. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But didn't. Like, he appeared to be Teflon for a long time. And he appeared that way because the rich people that he was serving were actually seeing returns, and he would do it every once in a while where, like, somebody would lose money on something or something would happen, and it would appear to be concurrent with what was going on in the market, but he was really just shorting his clients. But in doing that, like, because basically, if you go on a slot machine and you hit every single time, you're gonna start thinking there's something wrong with that slot machine.
Yeah. He probably got away with it longer had he post losses occasionally, like especially around the Enron time.
Well,
Uh
and he did. He did.
oh,
He was just very select. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, he would post losses, and there would be losses for his clients that appeared to be concurrent with what was going on in the market. But what he was really doing was just holding on to that money. But it was creating a paper trail that made it look more legitimate.
that makes sense.
Because then, because if he's the only investor where everybody's making buku bucks, even when the market's down and some of the biggest firms in the country are not making money, that also looks weird.
Yeah, yeah, it does. But
But
it sounds like what caught him was, well, it's impressive he made it as long as he did, but if he
yeah,
had kept to lower paying people, then he would have probably
gotten
still
away
been
with
doing
it.
it. Yep.
Yeah,
Retired, gone to live in some country without exorcism, extradition, not exorcism, extradiction,
yeah,
and lives happily ever after.
yep. Um, but here's the other interesting part. We talked about the dynamic of serial killers, and some of them have families, right? And like their families never know. His family didn't know. Like his sons worked for the company, but they never worked in the part of the company that was like mass shredding documents and cooking books and stuff like that. He basically used his family as camouflage to further legitimize him. And so the less that they knew about what was actually happening, the better. He literally used them as human shields for criticism.
Yeah, I think that's something that all evil people have in
Yep,
common, from serial killers to Bernie Madoff to certain presidents that are orange in color.
yep,
Like, although his family knows quite a bit, but there's always stuff they don't know, and they
right.
always compartmentalize it. It's always worse than you think, even if you are in the know. You're not fully in the know.
Yep. And so, in order to get to the bottom of what was actually happening, the FBI started watching him in 2001. So did the IRS, right? But they were not able to spot any like wildly egregious patterns until the run up to '08. And you got to remember, like, we were seeing signs that the housing market was going to collapse in '07, but like nobody on the news was talking about it. Everybody was hyping it up like it was the best thing that you could invest in. Like it was, go get your house right now because this is the only time in American history where you can get it with such a low interest rate. You can put very little down. You can have bad credit. Like they were just giving them to people that they knew would not be, they knew in that first meeting that those people were going to be foreclosed on based on their financial history, and they were doing it anyway.
Yeah, but when they know that the federal government's going to bail them out, then it's like it's not even a risk for the bank.
Right. To be clear, they didn't know for sure the federal government was going to bail them out at the time, but there were indicators. Like they bailed out a lot of the dot com, like a lot of the tech companies in the dot com bubble. They bailed out a lot of the contractors after Katrina. Like W. Bush did a lot of like carrying water for what would become oligarchs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he did. He's
Okay.
probably he's probably the first oligarch president in that. Not saying that we haven't had presidents that were members of the ruling elite. Far from that, but he was the first one that's main constituents were the oligarchs.
Yep.
Like every other one had to listen to at least the population somewhat.
Yep. And George W. Bush was the first president that, like, in my lifetime, where he would get significant backlash and, like, nobody would do anything about it.
Yep. Well, it was a criminal presidency, and just like we were talking about, ruling elites become weaker and softer and more debased as generations go on. We had Nixon, and what he did was pretty bad,
Yep.
and he faced no real consequence for it. People in his
Hmm.
administration went to jail, but he didn't.
Correct.
And then Reagan comes along, faced even less consequences for the Contra scandal.
It it's the same kind of thing that dictators do. They're testing the waters to see what they can get away with.
Yep. But with democracies, it's a little slower and it's not always one person. So
Yep.
it, f- and this is actually a John Bolton quote, so forgive me, but for every,
Hey, a broken clock can be right twice a day.
true, true. So John Bolton, I caught an interview with the guy, and he says, I'm going to paraphrase 'cause this was months
Yeah.
ago, but he said that for every Augustus, there's a Caesar and a Sulla and a Gracchi brothers.
Yep.
And it's true. For every dictator, from a democracy, there's always people that push the limit almost to dictatorship and fail.
Yep.
And eventually, if we let those people get away with it, we will fall into a dictatorship. And right now, no one's stopping anything right now because the Democratic Party is basically an opposition party that has nothing to its name.
Yep. Say it again for the people in the back, basically. You
Yeah.
know?
Well, I will say Ro Khanna's doing a great job,
Yep.
and I do love Bernie, but he's kind of dropped. I love AOC. She's my choice for next president, but she needs to do more too, as much as I love her. But yeah,
Yep. So, in order to like get to the bottom of what Bernie was actually doing and figure out where the money was coming from and where it was actually going, the FBI basically had to like move into Bernie Madoff's offices. And it was like a team of 15 special agents with a whole team around them, along with like law enforcement, people from the IRS. Like this took a whole team to unravel. Um, but it resulted in Madoff receiving a 150-year prison sentence. Now, this is he was one of the only people who was punished in the fallout of the '08 crisis. He was the most prominent, but he became kind of the scapegoat for the whole thing, too.
so let me ask you: do
Yeah,
you think that Madoff may get a pardon?
I don't know.
I've never
I
heard
it's
anyone talk about it, but I think it's a realistic possibility.
Is he even still alive?
I don't know,
I
actually.
thought he had passed away.
Well, never mind then. I don't think Trump cares about dead people.
No, no, he doesn't. And Trump and Madoff had beef going back in New York for years anyway.
Oh, okay, then yeah.
Um, Madoff was one of the first people to call Trump exactly what he was. Uh, you can be a scamming con man and still be right about a dictator asshole. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so he is dead. He died April
Yeah.
14th of 2021, right before tax day. That's kind of funny.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah, I
that
thought he had passed away. I wasn't sure exactly what year, but I was pretty sure he was dead. That's why he wasn't getting a pardon. You know what I mean? But also because they have historic beef going back to like the late 70s in New York. You know what I mean? Like he just never liked Trump as a person. And when other con men are like, "No, that's a piece of shit," you should probably listen.
yeah. I was just looking at how he died. Chronic kidney disease
Yep.
and hypertension. Guys, watch your diet.
Yep. So Madoff started trading stocks in like 1960, and he started as like a legitimate stock trader. Like he was a good market analyst. He was a great match. He was a great market matchmaker for like putting potential buyers with stocks. Like he had an eye. He at least had an eye for that. Like it wasn't just that this guy was like ripping people off. It's the thing that's infuriating about Madoff is that he could have made a total mint just legitimately. He just wouldn't have made as much.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Um, so he, in the early 60s, opened a side business where clients gave him money to invest on their behalf. This is like really common now, but in the 60s, there weren't a ton of investment advisory businesses. He was one of the first people to really get into like investment advisory for the stock market. His father-in-law was a successful accountant and he would recommend clients to him, and then those referrals were what he built his early career off of. And you got to think of the fact that like his father-in-law was a very successful accountant in New York. So this man probably had clients that were, anywhere from like upper middle class to like stratosphere rich. Because in the 60s you weren't investing in the stock market unless you really had money to invest. Because it wasn't like it is now where it's basically gambling. It was a different sort of market, if that makes sense. It was
It
much more.
it does. After the Great Depression and everything, there were a lot of reforms that were put in place that
Yep.
hadn't been eroded away to the extent. And also, people just made money working. I know making money working seems like a foreign concept nowadays, but in the 50s and 60s, you could actually just get a job and make money.
Yeah.
And so because of that, the urge to gamble away your life savings is a little less.
hmm So this is considered to be like one of the early turning points in Madoff. Okay. Um, the referrals were really, really good up until he made a one bad trade and lost a significant amount of money. And here, this is important to note. At the time, he didn't want to own up to the fact that he lost all this money for his father in law's friends. So he started covering it up with other fake trades. This started in the 60s. And it was a decision that he made because he did not want to tell his father in law that he had lost all of this money for everybody. It was a decision made out of shame. But he would start padding his books with trades that like weren't legitimate, but they looked legitimate. But it snowballed from there because once you tell one lie, you have to tell 20 more to cover it up.
Yeah.
And so the scheme actually worked, right? So like this worked. His father-in-law never knew that he lost all that money. He was able to get money back to people. He was able to pull in other investors, and this was the first time that he did the whole I'm going to take the money directly from the other investors and give it to the people that I just lost a bunch of money for. Okay?
Mhm.
And he was able to keep this up for a decade. This is into the 70s. And in the 70s, he hired a bond whiz named David Kugel. And this was for the legitimate side of the business. Okay. This was for the forward facing, public facing, we're a good financial advisory company. You know, this was uh, for the above board appearance. Okay. Kugel had a reputation for sourcing the market and to find bonds offered by companies. This was during the bond boom of the 60s and 70s, okay? And that the bonds that he would find were priced lower than the company's stocks. So it was a pretty safe investment for people. And you could buy the less expensive bond, convert it to the higher price stock, and then sell the stock. So you would buy in at the lower number, convert it to the stock, and then sell the stock at the higher price. And so you would be pocketing the difference there. And the price discrepancy is called convertible bond arbitrage, and it's a legitimate financial strategy. A lot of people make a lot of money doing that. Um, but Madoff had asked Kugel to write down the details of his trades and share them with him and his bookkeeper, Annette Bongiorno, who started working at the firm in 1968. And Kugel gave detailed index cards that she kept in a box, and investors found this box from the 60s and 70s after Madoff was arrested. So this man saved his own paper trail. Think about that. He saved evidence of all of his crimes.
It's like he wanted to be caught.
Kinda. He's given interviews he had given interviews from prison that very much indicated that he knew he was on a sinking ship for most of the time. But he was able to keep everything going and growing for 30 fucking years. Um, a year after being hired, Kugel opened a personal account with the firm's investment advisory business. When he received his first monthly statement, he noticed the details of the trades were eerily familiar. They were exactly the same as the arbitrage trades he had conducted for Madoff's legitimate business, but with different volumes. Okay?
Okay.
So already that's weird, okay? Um, so in the 70s, an arbitrage trade would only be available on the market for like a few minutes. In today's market, they're available for as little as a few seconds. Okay. Kugel's expertise was in finding and buying these arbitrage opportunities before the other traders did. He was very good at that. And like this guy was like legitimately a wizard at that. Okay. Like he was hired because he had this one specific skill and was kind of legendary for it. Okay. Um, but once a trade was conducted, the opportunity was gone. There's no extra profits to be had because Kugel had already obtained them all. Like, but as Kugel saw those same trades he had personally made with different figures and for different amounts, he knew that it was impossible. Okay, so like already in the beginning, the people that he's hiring like are kind of catching on that he's screwing up, right?
Mhm.
But he was a real smooth talker. Uh, Immediately he went to Madoff and said this whole thing is a fraud. These are absolutely fake trades. He could tell immediately. And this was the bread and butter of Bernie Madoff's schemes. The trades and profits were indeed fake, but the financial strategies behind them were not. So Kugel had unwittingly given Madoff an air of legitimacy. Um, Kugel didn't object when he discovered the truth, um, and continued to share his trades and profiting from the results. Like, he knew it was a fraud and he kept going, basically. And then because of this, Madoff allowed him to set his own salary. He withdrew enough money through the scheme to become a multimillionaire. He owned houses in gated communities in Florida and on Long Island. So this guy with legitimate trading expertise found out it was a fraud and made the choice to keep going. Okay? This happened several times with Bernie Madoff. And basically, Bernie knew he had to take care of these people because they knew what was going on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's he was buying their silence, and they joined in. He basically said, "Join me, and we'll rule the financial market as
And
their."
they did.
Yeah,
Okay. Um, oof. Bernie Madoff, like the investment securities with Kugel in tow, deployed several other strategies to keep the appearance of high profits for its Ponzi scheme account. Okay. In addition to the accountant manipulating Kugel's trades, she deployed another strategy that was extremely unsophisticated but very effective. Okay. The accountant, Bongiorno, would research old editions of the newspaper to identify the best performing stocks in the past month. She'd then pick the most profitable, make up a number for how many shares the investor had quote unquote bought, and record the gain at the end of the month on the client's statement. Everybody, it's that old everybody's a financial genius with 2020 hindsight, right?
yeah,
So, brazen as the lies were, the firm basically set up its internal rules for handling the Ponzi account, right? And I'm my outline from this came directly from the FBI website about the account, about the case, because I figured that would have more of the details than it did. But you know, they set up internal rules for handling the Ponzi account. Only like two or three people in the company ever had access to it, and it never communicated with the accounts from Madoff's legitimate business because Madoff also had a legitimate investing business at the same time. This is where the mob tactics come into play. Like, you know how they talk about mobsters having two sets of books?
yeah. You had said he has 3 sets, though, right?
Yep, we're about to go into it. We're about to go into it. He started with two, but as this snowballed further and further out of control over the decades, and he had to pay off more and more people for silence, like he had to start keeping different ledgers for different things. But to ensure clients didn't get suspicious, each account had to be monitored. If clients knew each other and ever compared statements, the numbers had to generally add up. So that's another layer of deception in there. They are making it so if because a lot of their clients know each other because they run in the same circles. They're recommended by the same people. So if they ever start comparing statements, they all look similar, right? Like they really did legitimately think about how to make this lie work at every turn, and that's why it worked. Um, but despite building a portfolio of hundreds of millions of dollars, right? Madoff only had a few accounts in the Ponzi scheme. The client list was short enough for Madoff's firm to manage these accounts with strategies like Kugel's and Bongiorno's. The firm, they instituted minimum account balances. So like you had to keep a certain amount in there so that people weren't pulling all their money at once. And to join the investment advisory business, an investor generally deposited at least 1 million and needed to keep $1 million as a minimum balance. And when they instated those fees and those bare minimums, they were forcing those people to keep their money invested, they thought. And these rules allowed Madoff to have a steady amount of cash and created a sense of exclusivity. And what do rich people like more than anything? Exclusivity.
Like being the special little snowflakes they are.
Yep.
Uh,
To have an account with Bernie Madoff meant that you were special.
so
So, it,
so it required $1 million. So we aren't talking about the small mom and pop investors. We're
not
talking
at
some.
first. Not at
Gotcha.
first. As the business grew and the 401ks started to become more popular for retirement, um, in the like in the 90s and early 2000s, because retirement funds were going away, that's when he really got bonkers with it. That's when he really got like a lot of the little people in, because he was able to, a lot of the rich people who were already invested in him owned companies or worked with banks that worked with like smaller investors, like, a teacher's credit union or firefighters funds or retirement for this or that. And he was only able to gain access to those smaller accounts because he spent a good 15 or 20 years dealing with these big fish accounts. Okay? So he built up a reputation over time with people around him who knew that the fraud was taking place, choosing to give him an air of legitimacy. It really is like the emperor has no clothes kind of a situation, where everybody's just, everybody's hyping this guy up, and they are legitimately making a lot of money. It is just ill-gotten gains. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, it does. It's easy to once you get the light rolling, it's easy to continue it because you have a history.
Right. Um so the biggest thing though is that, Bernie is a market maker. He's not supposed to be doing this investment advisory business, right? But anyone operating an investment advisory business has to register with the SEC, the Security and Exchange Commission. And Madoff had originally opened the investment advisory business on the side. He never registered it. Like, never once, even when he was dealing with multi-million dollar accounts. People were investing other people's money into Bernie Madoff's accounts based on Bernie Madoff's reputation. And in 30 years, he never registered the like the investment advisory business with the SEC, and nobody popped him on it.
That's
So he's
wild.
effective. Yeah, yeah. So like, as long as they were letting him do it, he was gonna do it. You know what I mean?
So, one thing people on the right often don't understand is the more money you sink into IRS, the more money is created. And
Mhm.
this is a good example. They talk about how Biden hired 87,000 people, and I do get it. Like, if those people were not allowed to go after the rich, that is concerning. But assuming they were, like, someone hired to go after the rich would possibly have found this out earlier,
Yeah.
and maybe some people would sell their life
But you
savings.
but you have to understand the timeline in which this was playing out, right? This part of the business was playing out in the late 70s into the 80s, which was the Reagan era. What happened in the Reagan era?
A
Com-
lot.
Complete
Be more
a
specific.
lot of financial deregulation.
Yes, that's true. Reagan liked deregulation.
Yeah. So they weren't looking at the rich people. They had an explicit agreement not to look at the rich people. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Bernie Madoff was able to get away with what he did because of the very unique place America was in the late 70s through the 80s, where we went from, you know, a lot of social safety nets, New Deal politics, almost overnight with Reagan into completely unregulated fuck shit capitalism.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I forget where I heard this story from, but the IRS had invented or created a task force to go after the ultra wealthy dodging taxes. And in the first year or so, they found tens of millions of dollars, not just from known criminals, which is what they expected, but from people that were rich and powerful. And then so they immediately closed down the branch and redirected those agents elsewhere because they were too good at their job.
Well, the main reason that he never that he gave himself that he never registered the business with the SEC was that if he had, it would open him up to being audited, and he couldn't risk it. So instead, Madoff masked his investment advisory business as part of his legitimate work. It was an open secret on Wall Street. Basically, everybody knew that that's what was going on, but nobody said anything because people thought they were making money. And as Madoff's investments grew, his status grew with him. So it really just further solidified this legitimacy around him, right? It's myth building. It's the same thing that CEOs do. It's the same thing that leaders do. It's the same thing that dictators do. Human beings like a mythos. We love a good mythos.
Yep, you gotta have a good story. And I'm sure he mythologized how he grew up
Yep,
and turned that whole into a story because he's selling not just his product, he's selling himself too.
yep. And he was one hell of a salesman. Over the years, Madoff's firm grew to include his brother Peter, who became his firm's first compliance officer, which is just funny to think about. Nepotism.
Yeah,
Hired his brother to be the compliance officer.
we were talking about that off air right before this.
We were. We were.
Won't say what
Uh,
though.
it could be anything in America right now. There's a lot of nepotism.
True, true. I'll tell you what, guys. If this podcast takes off, I promise to spill the beans on a lot of more stuff.
Yep, so will I. You won't be able to keep my mouth shut if you guys keep listening.
Yeah, we
Uh,
just we just can't be 100% upfront about our opinions on certain Mideastern countries or whatnot because they go after your jobs.
yep. Yes, they do.
Talking, of course, about Iran.
Yes, of course. Um, but he hired his brother to be his firm's first and only compliance officer for the that first run, and other personnel who were hired throughout the 60s and 70s. So like he was hiring from people that he knew, people that like were in his family, people that nepotism, right? And each of these employees participated in the Ponzi scheme and stayed in the firm until the end. So he surrounded himself with people that he knew he could trust not to drop the dime on him. And he was able to pay them enough that they wouldn't do it. Okay? So into the 80s the firm just starts going gangbusters because once the deregulation happened, the stock market went bonkers, right? And the referrals that Madoff received from his father in law still kept coming in, and soon they made up an extremely large portion of the Ponzi scheme account. His father in law had since retired, and the accounting firm, renamed Avello and Bynes, invested exclusively with Madoff, and business boomed for both firms until 1992. But in 1992 is when the SEC contacted Avelio and Bynes on a suspicion that it was operating as an unregistered investment advisory business, which is exactly what it was doing. The firm alerted Madoff about the pending investigation, revealing a deeper problem. Avelio and Bynes was essentially running its own Ponzi scheme on top of Madoff's.
Wow.
Yeah,
So we have Ponzi v Ponzi going on here.
yeah, it's Ponzi scheme inception.
You could almost say it's a pyramid of Ponzi's. Maybe
Yeah.
never mind, bad joke.
But like but what's worse is the monthly statements it created for its clients did not match the statements that Madoff had on file. They were literally just sending out bullshit at that point. Um, so their lies were different than Bernie's lies. And that's like an immediate dead giveaway, right? So when your accounting firm is running its own Ponzi scheme and you're supposed to be working together and you own both firms, but the information isn't the same and the lies aren't the same on either end, that's a problem.
You got to get your story straight.
Yep. So Madoff had become extremely worried. He knew that when Avelio and Bynes told the SEC that all of its funds were invested with his firm, investors they'd want to compare statements, right? And this would reveal that like literally everything was fake at this point. It was bullshit all the way down. And the discrepancies were so significant and could not be explained at all. The paperwork Avelo and Bynes had on file indicated a completely different financial strategy than what Madoff was sending out to people. And the account balances were off by more than 100 million.
Slight mistake there.
Yeah. So Madoff ordered his staff, including Bongiorno, to redo 3 years of financial statements and strategies to match what Avelio and Bynes had on file. This is a massive fire drill. The statements were totally fake, but everything had to seem real enough and consistent to the SEC investigators.
That's
And
wild because that would need a lot of people in on that.
right, right,
Wow.
right. So like I mean this was like the worst kept secret in New York, basically. Um and the SEC was actually pleased with the matching paperwork, but have ordered Avilo and Bynes to shut down. That meant that all of its clients had to be issued checks for their full account balances. Now, what happens when there's a run on the bank?
Run out of money.
Right. And this was in 92. According to the newly created fake paperwork, that money was in possession of Bernard L. Madoff Investment Securities. But the problem was, Madoff didn't have enough money in the bank to issue the checks, which at that time totaled roughly $440 million in 1992. That's a lot of money in 92.
Not
And if he
now.
did,
Everyone's got that money now.
no, it's still a lot of money now, but it was a lot more money in 92 is what I'm trying
No, I know.
to
I'm just teasing.
emphasize to people. Um, and if he didn't send the money, the SEC was going to take a closer look at his books. Okay. So this is where it starts getting even wilder, right? He borrowed stock from a rich client that he used as collateral to secure a loan. Are you with me?
Mm-hmm.
How do you borrow stock?
I'm not a stock surgeon, so I don't know.
Right. But Madoff did not reveal the true reason why his firm needed the loan. But the lie succeeded in getting the money. So Madoff issued the check. I mean, like this is wild behavior, right? But since all of the Avelio and Bynes clients were invested with him to start, 95 to 98% of the clients gave the money back to Bernie Madoff to make direct accounts with him because they thought they had just hit a financial windfall. So he not only survived the crisis, but he made money off of it. He got new investors. Do you know how many people had to be involved in this to keep it going?
More than what was caught.
Right.
Yeah, people had to have gotten away with it. Probably people in politics.
Yep. Madoff's the only person that ever did prison time for this, by the way.
Yeah, I was looking at the Wikipedia page as we were talking. Not everyone had a happy ending, but
No.
yeah, a lot of them escaped justice for sure.
Yep. So, you know, what happens when you're committing a crime and you keep getting away with it?
You level up from level 1 thug to level 50 thug and get the girl. I've seen I've seen this advertised on YouTube.
Yes. Yes, something like that. Um, so there was a Wall Street Journal article in the 90s about him that was like a fluff piece, and it was called "It's Because It's Bernie Madoff." Okay, and the Wall Street Journal article credited him as the savior of Avelio and Bine's crisis. So now he's getting all this good PR from the Wall Street Journal,
Mhm.
and his face was printed with the iconic dot matrix sketch in the newspaper what that the newspaper's famous for. Like, they were putting out his picture. And Madoff's Wall Street profile soared after this, and he was named chairman of the NASDAQ Composite in 1990. So after the Avalio and Bynes crisis, right? Madoff took on roughly 2,000 additional clients, okay? And this presented all kinds of new logistical challenges because anytime you bring in that many more people and that much more money, you have to have more people who know what's going on to manage the lies, right?
Yeah,
Like, you can't just have.
it's not like running a dictatorship. For long-term viewers, I explained how to keep a dictatorship going. But another
Mhm.
rule of thumb for running your own little dictatorship is you have to give away a piece of the pie to
Yep,
your lieutenants to keep them loyal because they're not going to do it out of love or respect. That's no one does anything for that. You have to pay them off somehow.
right.
So that's what he was doing.
Yep. Okay. And with so many new accounts to fake, Kugel's and Bongiorno's techniques weren't enough anymore. They needed a new strategy. And the solution came from an unlikely source. Okay. Originally hired in 1975 at age 18 to be an errand boy, Frank DePascali, he rose through the ranks of Bernie Madoff Investments and eventually devised a complicated strategy called split strike conversion. Okay, and this is really important because this is what took Bernie Madoff from like being really big in New York to being really big all over the country and having international investors and shit. Okay, split strike conversion, it allows people essentially to buy stocks and then hedges the purchase by buying and selling options. An option is a separate transaction that allows someone to buy or sell a stock at a specific price at a specific time. The strategy is legitimate but does not usually make money in the long term. It can turn a profit, and a hefty one, though, when using fake numbers. So, again, the strategy is legitimate, but the numbers aren't. So, if he were to pitch this strategy to any other investor, it wouldn't sound crazy other than that he was getting rich off of it, right? But it is a legitimate strategy. It is taught in business schools, okay?
Hmm.
But to avoid any reporting with the SEC, the firm was because the firm was not registered as an investment advisory business. The firm reinvested the stocks at the end of the month in treasury bills, which are not susceptible to an audit. Are we starting to see here?
Yes. Yes, I am. Treasury bills a lot safer for investment.
Yep.
No audits. and the U.S. Treasury bill, at least at the time, is the safest investment you could make.
Correct. See, and that's what kills me about this is that Bernie Madoff was legitimately brilliant. You do not pull off a hustle like this without being fucking big brain. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Because to keep this lie going for as long as he did, like if he had just applied this kind of like strategy to like a legitimate business strategy, he probably could have made a lot of money. He might not have made as much money as he did, but he could have made a lot of money. This is where things start to draw scrutiny. Okay, in 2001, two financial trade publications wrote articles that questioned Madoff's investment advisory business, which wasn't supposed to exist. Why Madoff's advisor that questioned why Madoff's advisory business, which wasn't supposed to exist yet, had the best returns on Wall Street with a portfolio of nearly $7 billion for a firm that's not even supposed to exist at the moment. Think about how wild that statement is. Because you deal with financial regulatory stuff.
yeah, that's y- red alert there. I'm don't know how that didn't sound off alarm shot then and there.
I know. In an interview for the article from Barron's, Madoff brushed off the questions about his strategy, calling it proprietary. So then, this is more myth building. He's saying, "Oh, this is a secret sauce. I'm not going to tell you what I'm doing. You just don't understand it because you're not smart enough."
So they all thought it was a secret sauce, and it turned out to be a Mick Arch, like we talked about earlier.
Yep,
He was,
this is fraud all the way down. And the reason I'm detailing all of this is because most white collar crime follows patterns like this. They may not be as blatant, but the patterns are there. You know what I mean?
yeah. Well,
Um,
like with any kind of white collar crime, and one day I'll be able to tell the audience more about my experience with that. But
yep,
just like with any white collar crime, it begins with good intentions. Like it
yeah.
begins with good intentions, then, well, maybe this one time, or no one will notice, or this is better than the alternative. And it just falls apart. It's
The same kind of thing happens to cops,
yeah,
and I call it noble cause corruption because they really are trying to do the right thing. They just get so frustrated in the position that they're in that they're willing to do anything to get the results that they want. And it's a similar sort of mindset in white collar crime. Like you may start out your business with really, really good like intentions and you may want to keep doing the right thing. But when you start getting away with doing the wrong thing and you're making way more money than you ever did doing the right thing, you'd be hard pressed to find any like business bro who would turn that down. Okay. But the articles were basically alleging that this investment advisory business, the worst kept secret on Wall Street, might be a giant fraud. And that's when Bernie starts getting scared. He deployed the firm to create a massive supply of fake documentation, just like he had in the previous case, so that there are records to show the trades are legitimate. So they're just faking entire reams of paperwork at this point. They are literally building a lie architecture. But what that did was when anybody went and looked through their statements or looked through anything, it
When
looked
this
like they
story
had
hits the
legitimate
airwaves, it's
information.
going.
Okay. So that basically, so what they were doing was they're creating reams of fake documentation so that whenever anybody looks into it and tries to say, oh, you're not doing this or this or this or this, everything appears to be legitimate. But they're basically building a lie infrastructure. You're fine.
I had myself muted while I was looking it up. Anyway, let me restart my that sentence. So I was looking up the spy information while you were talking. This just
Mhm.
spy that was talking about what you were saying that cops go through, and this is
Yep.
how people turn against their country is just a little bit at a time. I'm gonna butcher his last
Mhm.
name, so me looking it up may not have actually done much good. But Andrew Bustamante,
Yep. Andrew Bustamante, the former CIA guy. Yep.
yeah, he had really good interview on Diary of a CEO. I know a lot of our audience won't want to watch Diary of a CEO. I don't blame you. They have a lot of trash on that, and I'm like, why? But I have caught a few of their episodes, and he had a really interesting point that people fall into these ethical traps where they think, well, just one time will do the trick, and then it snowballs, and one minor ethical violation becomes larger and larger and larger, and all of a sudden
Yeah,
you're
because you
like
got to keep.
Bernie
Yeah.
Madoff.
Yeah. And that's exactly what happened here. He just kept faking it to make it. And we have that saying in America, fake it till you make it. Well, that's what he was doing. So De, De Pascali tapped two computer programmers he used to automate this split strike strategy, right? And he dubbed them the computer boys. Literally, that's what he called them. And they were George Perez and Jerome O'Hara. And they created like the majority of the false records, okay, from 2001 on. To demonstrate just how far Madoff took this scheme, okay, this is a great example. The firm created fake documents for each and every one of its quote unquote trades. So they had documentation for every little transaction they were supposed to have been making. A lot of work. This is a lot of work, okay? Like they probably if they had invested this amount of time into like actually investing, they probably still would have made a lot of money. They didn't. They invested it into faking things. But the depository trust company maintains records of every stock that it has bought and sold. So Perez and O'Hara obtained the real DTC statements and copied them in mass, even hiring another programmer to create a custom code that duplicated the statement's unique font. So now they're not just now they're just going full blown fraud at this point. Not that they haven't been full blown fraud, but this is another line that's crossed, okay? So the team held the fake statements against the windows facing the sun, comparing them to the actual statement. The fake statements were not perfect, but they were good enough to fool somebody who only kind of knew this business, right? And this is what they spent their time on, hours and hours and hours a day doing this. And then it happened. In 2004, the SEC contacted Madoff to audit his firm. The audits began in '04. They just took a while. The SEC suspected that Madoff was front running stocks from his legitimate business as a market maker, which he was. The thinking was that as Madoff matched buyers and sellers, he became aware of non public financial information and made his own personal trades before acting on behalf of his clients, which is illegal. That's insider trading. That's what Martha Stewart went to prison for. Um, while Madoff had created thousands of paper documents to show his records were real, there was one area he didn't resolve, and that was identifying counterparties. Okay? And this is important. This is going to be very important later because like this guy is one of those people who thought of almost everything, but I want to stress the almost, right? Because we all have blind spots, and like if you're maintaining this elaborate of a lie for this long with this many people involved, you're not going to keep track of everything, right?
That's what I was saying earlier. Like, this guy reminds me of George R. R. Martin with his ability to just keep track of such a diverse and broad swath of people's lives. And in this case,
Yep.
lies instead of characters. But uh, it's honestly kind of impressive.
Yeah. Yeah. Like as far as like white collar crimes go, this is one of the most impressive ones I've ever seen pulled off because of how long he was able to pull it off. Cuz like that takes a certain kind of skill. It may not be a skill that we want replicated in society, but it does take a skill. You know what I mean? Not everybody can lie that well. So, but since all of Madoff's trades were fake, there were no counterparties. So, how could he get past the SEC? Well, Madoff believed that since the SEC was a government agency, it had a limited budget. He thought that if he listed foreign counterparties, the auditors would not get approval to make international phone calls to verify them because it would be too expensive. Think about that. A Madoff employee researched a list of European counterparties, and the computer boys then randomly assigned them each under a stock audit. None of the foreign counterparties were ever contacted, and the firm passed the audit. So he's gotten away with it now 3 times. Think about that. All because they couldn't make an international phone call to say, hey, are you invested with Bernie Madoff? Because the government wouldn't pay for it. Think about that. Are you there?
No, I'm here. I'm here. You were on a roll. I didn't want to interrupt you.
No, 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 it's okay. Um, I was just wondering if you had any thought about that, because what I'm about to drop on you next is a mouthful. So, like,
Lay it on me.
okay. A Madoff employee researched a list of European counterparties. Okay, so like they passed the audit basically, right? So a year later, the SEC returned to Madoff's offices to conduct another audit. The firm again inundated the auditors with reams of paper. They overwhelmed them with paperwork, and like overwhelm them with information. It's the same tactic prosecutors use and same tactic attorneys use all the time. Overwhelm them with paperwork. One evening, as the auditors left for the day, one of them accidentally left a briefcase behind, and Madoff and DePascali went through it. The briefcase contained a list of questions the auditors planned to ask the Madoff staff the following day. The firm didn't have any paperwork for one of the questions, so Madoff was able to order his staff to work through the night to create the necessary documents. In the span of 2 years, Madoff's firm was audited 5 different times, and through deception and luck, it passed every single one of them.
That's why we need more IRS agents.
Yep. All right. This is the part of Ring Around the Rosie where we all fall down. Okay? Madoff and his employees were living the high life. And of course, passing all those audits just made him look even more legitimate to other investors, right? Look at this. Like he's been audited 5 times and he's passed every single one. Everything is good, right? That appears to be above the board, right? So, several staff members have withdrawn millions of dollars over the years to purchase luxury cars and homes. Di Pascali owned 2 boats. Bongiorno, excuse me, Bongiorno, owned 2 houses and was building a condo. Madoff himself owned 4 homes, including a Manhattan penthouse and a home in the French Riviera. He also owned 3 yachts. But as of the fall of 2008 drew closer, his life of riches would become incredibly difficult to sustain. So In 2008, Wall Street was collapsing. Firms were either merging or going bankrupt. The government intervened in several instances to guarantee loans or bail out companies, and they spent billions of dollars doing this. The stock market dropped lower each day. The financial sky was falling, except at Bernie Madoff. Gains were still being recorded with an average return of 1% a month. They never adjusted for the recession. Worried investors were reassured in knowing their Madoff accounts were doing well, but many still wanted to withdraw their money. And that is the death knell for any Ponzi scheme when everyone wants to get their money out at once. That's what did it. Was the financial collapse. He probably would still be doing this to this day successfully if the markets had not completely crashed in '08.
Makes you wonder how many Madoffs made it out without being discovered.
Quite a few, because we don't punish white collar crime in this country.
Oop.
Not the way we should. So once again, Madoff did not have the money to cover the withdrawals. But unlike the first time this happened, he's looking at like billions of dollars at this point, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, I got too
Uh,
big.
yeah. So Madoff frantically looked for an investor to give him an infusion of cash to cover the difference, but could not find anyone willing to invest in such a risky financial time. And on December 3rd, 2008, Madoff pulled Frank DePascali aside and said, "I'm out of money." And then a week later, on December 10th, 2008, Madoff held the firm's annual Christmas party where he handed out early bonuses. His two sons, Mark and Andrew, who had worked for the firm for several years, had grown concerned, and they finally confronted him. And he said, "Let's go to the house and talk." When the Madoff family arrived home, Madoff apparently told his wife and sons for the first time that his entire firm was a fraud. "I'm running a Ponzi scheme and we're out of money." That's literally what he said. The sons cut off all ties with Madoff and their mother, and left the house, called an attorney, and that attorney called the SEC, which then called the FBI's New York office. It was his sons who turned him in.
Hmm.
And one of his sons later committed suicide over it.
I saw that when I was looking at the Wikipedia pages. Murder suicide, if I recall.
Yep. Yes, it was. The next day, the FBI special agents visited Madoff at his house. They confronted him about the accusation. "We're here to see if if there's an innocent explanation." They even gave him a way out. And the agent said, "There is no innocent explanation. I've been running a massive Ponzi scheme." He just confessed when he was confronted. Literally just confessed. After a short discussion, the agents called the assistant United States attorney, who agreed that Madoff should be arrested. Madoff insisted that he was the only person with knowledge of the Ponzi scheme and that he operated it alone. While he confessed to running the scheme, he started lying about the mechanics of it and said that he would not testify against anyone. Madoff pled guilty and was convicted on March 12, 2009. On June 29th, he was sentenced to 150 years in prison and transferred to a federal correctional complex in North Carolina. It's the same one that a lot of white collar criminals go to. And he died April 2021 at the prison's medical center. He was 82.
Wild.
But without Madoff's cooperation, investigators turned to members of his staff and they all claimed to be innocent. But investigators dismissed the idea that anyone could pull off a multi-billion-dollar fraud on their own. Right? DePascali, the firm's chief operating officer, faced charges that could end in life in prison. He contacted prosecutors in April 2009, 5 months after Madoff's arrest, and offered to cooperate in exchange for immunity. Prosecutors rejected his offer but assured him that cooperating was still his best deal. DePascali agreed. And the reason that we know as much about the mechanics of this as we do is because De Pascali was one of the computer boys. For the next 3 years, the FBI examined every document in Madoff's office. They lived in that office like a team for like 3 years and interviewed hundreds of victims to determine who helped Madoff in the scheme. Dozens of subjects were identified and 14 were ultimately charged. Several of the 14 pleaded guilty or cooperated with the government. Peter Madoff, Bernie's brother and the firm's chief compliance officer, pled guilty but did not cooperate with the FBI. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison. He'd taken 15.7 million over the life of the fraud. He forfeited all this and his family's assets, including their homes, and more than 10 million in savings. Only 5 employees insisted on their innocence, including bookkeeper Annette Bongiorno, who was like, and the computer boys, who were like, eh, they were the ones doing all the shit, right? Um, George Perez and Jerome O'Hara. Bongiorno was the one who hired the computer boys. He was like their boss. The computer boys themselves were George Perez and Jerome O'Hara. And they all insisted that they were innocent. Their cases went to trial with De Pascali as the lead government witness. The trial ended in guilty verdicts for all 5 employees. The computer boys only got 2.5 year sentences, and Bongiorno received the 6 years. De Pascali spent 6 weeks on the stand, and his testimony proved essential for the government's cases against Madoff's staff. De Pascali was never sentenced himself, though. In March 2015, he called a fish to tell him that he called fish to tell him that he had been diagnosed with lung cancer and he died 2 months later. Now, much like Enron, most of the victims of this never saw any of that money back because it was fake. It was buying yachts and houses in the French Riviera. It was never invested properly, right? So it's just a wild case to have had happen in my adult life. It's one of those things, you know how they say that men think about the Roman Empire like 14 times a day or something?
I might be
Like,
guilty of that.
my Roman Empire is two things. It's the 2001 New York Post cover of the Bimbo Summit with Britney Spears, Paris Hilton, and Lindsay Lohan all in the same car and they're fighting. And then Bernie Madoff,
Hmm.
because so much of what is going on now, the fuckery that is going on now, can be directly traced back to Bernie Madoff and Enron.
Well,
By not prosecuting these things fully, we let people continue to get away with them.
oh, absolutely, absolutely. Well, let's see if we have a repeat as things crash and burn.
You know, history likes to echo. There will always be a bigger Ponzi dick.
Yep, always a bigger fish, as Qui-Gon once said.
Yep. So what did you think hearing it all laid out like that? For like, because I know you weren't. I knew you were like familiar with the very, very broad strokes of it. You knew it was. You knew he had a Ponzi scheme. But what did you think when I started detailing how blatant the fraud was?
Well, the guy's a genius, and you're right. If he had just been honest, he probably would have made 70-80% what he did.
Right.
Like there's a mental disease when it comes to money that you have to have more and more and more. And it's like if he had just done the right thing, he might even still be alive because I'm sure going through that adds a lot of stress.
Yep.
But like he wouldn't have gone to jail, his name wouldn't have been soiled, his son probably would still be alive and his daughter-in-law. Like just do the right thing, people.
Right. And like, don't let your hunger for money overwhelm your common sense.
Yep. There's a quote from a very famous person that's I'm gonna probably butcher it, but if you pay a man enough, he'll walk barefoot into hell.
Yep.
It's actually from the cartoon Gargoyles.
That cartoon was so freaking awesome.
I know. It's such a good quote too. Like, oh my gosh, it sounds like it should be like Hemingway or Shakespeare or someone, but no, it's uh cartoon Will Riker.
Yep.
But it's true, you know. He paid these people to follow him, and they screwed over a lot of people. And I'm sure at least one of their victims was also involved in Enron,
Yep.
like just by sheer happenstance. But
Yeah, because they were two of the biggest investments at the time.
yeah, so like I can imagine a scenario. I don't know if this happened, but I can imagine a scenario where husband and wife, husband works for Enron, goes under, he loses everything. But they're like, it's okay, we
Hmm.
still have your amazing savings with Bernie Madoff.
Right.
We'll get through this.
Right.
It actually is a good book plot out there for any of you writers. That'd actually be a pretty good book story. But yeah, man, I feel bad for these people that
Yeah.
Madoff screwed. It's sad that we don't punish white collar crime like we should.
Yeah. But I mean, that's what unregulated capitalism is, unfortunately. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Like, because when you don't regulate the markets, you're inviting insider trading, you're inviting, crime, basically.
very true. But yeah, thank you for the
No
story.
problem.
Yeah, and two
Do you,
episodes.
mhm.
Sorry, say it again. We talked over each
Do
other.
you see? Oh, it's okay. Do you see how the stories connect though, and like how they're parallel to each other?
Yeah, yeah, I do. I I can see why they kind of blend together, and I'm looking forward to the trilogy.
Yeah. Oh, the next one is Sam Bankman-Fried, dear, and that
Oh,
one's even wilder.
I was making a joke about the near future, but yes, that one's crazy because that's got a polycule and it's got FTX or I don't know. It's got a bunch of
Lots of
initials.
lots of celebrities for legitimacy.
Yeah, apes. It has apes. It has all kinds of
Yep.
fun stuff. So I'm looking forward to
Yep.
that one.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for listening. You will get both of these episodes because I have been sick and I did not get everything uploaded the way that I should before I ended up in the hospital, which I am in right now. I am okay, but I am still in the hospital. And yeah, we're gonna get this. We'll get it done. And I can't wait for you guys to hear these. I really can't.
Well, thank you for having me, and bye, everyone.
Bye bye.